I'm sure that there'll be stats that come up in the panel, but just so you know, each year 1 in 4 women will experience either pregnancy loss or miscarriage at work, in their life in general. It's a far, far more common experience than people realise, and that's partly because we don't really talk about it all that much. So we're going to try and change that here, and here to share more on the subject, I've got 3 speakers and a wonderful panel moderator. I'm going to introduce you guys all together, and then if you can come up onto the stage afterwards. We've got Samantha Payne, who is the co-founder and CEO of the Pink Elephant Support Network, which is a network that looks to support those who've experienced miscarriage and on a fertility journey. Emma Walsh is the CEO of Parents at Work. This is a global education and policy advisory business that campaigns for adequate parental leave. And Sonia Guidice, who is a proud Gunggari and Wakka Wakka midwife from Queensland. She is extremely passionate, as I'm sure you'll see, about ensuring that all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and families have access to what Tanya was talking about, which is holistic, culturally safe health and maternity care. And that panel is going to be moderated by Tarla Lambert-Patel, who you all know as the Editor-in-Chief of Women's Agenda. So please welcome all 4 wonderful women to the stage.
Thank you so much for joining me here and listening to this next panel, which is a conversation that's very close to my own heart, and I feel like it's probably close to the hearts of and experiences of so many women in this room. As Jan just pointed out, 1 in 4 women experience pregnancy loss at work. I was actually one of them. So I am really excited to have this panel with us today to share more on what employers can actually do to set a better tone and to create a more supportive network within their own organisations. Sam, I want to start with you because you have also been incredibly open and vocal about your own experience with miscarriage. And you've also been really open about how important the sense of community was for you, which was perhaps not something that you had at the time that you were experiencing miscarriage, but something that you have now built through the Pink Elephant Support Network. Can you share a little bit more about the notion of community and what employers can do to better foster that within their own organisations?
Yeah, sure. So my journey began in August 2015 when I heard the words, "I'm sorry, there is no heartbeat." That is a sentence that forever changed my life. And it is a sentence that, as we've heard, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss. So that's 1 in 4 that will hear those very words. And up until August 2015, there was no specific support in Australia for early pregnancy loss or miscarriage. It really was shrouded in silence, shame, and stigma. It was actually after my second miscarriage, a few short months later, where I began to get really angry at that lack of support, the isolation that I was feeling, mixed with a GP that had told me, it's really common, everyone's had one, you'll be pregnant again soon enough. I was like, okay, so it's really common, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss, yet I'm here, no one wants to talk about miscarriage. It's a dirty, shameful secret, is what it felt like. And to me, the way that I deal with things is I talk through them, but I had no one to talk to who understood it or even wanted to listen to me in the right way. And I'm not discounting friends. I had beautiful friends. I have an amazing partner. They didn't know how to help me because society's misperception on how miscarriages manage had taught them, at least it happened early. At least you already have a child. At least you know you can get pregnant. And so I knew that needed to change. That narrative needed to be challenged. The shame, the stigma needs to be removed. Because if 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss, everyone deserves that empathy and support. We now know from research that without support, 33% of women were measured as clinical levels of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, 9 months after a pregnancy loss. And that's from Professor Tom Bourne's work in the UK, who's incredible in this space. And that was after ectopic pregnancies, which are even further minimised because they happen really early, right? So back in 2016, I decided to create the Pink Elephants. I knew that what was needed was more validation and empathy, but I also knew that within the elephant community, if a mother elephant loses her baby, the elephants form a physical circle of support around her. And when I found that out, it gave me goosebumps because that is what Pink Elephants wanted to be. We wanted to create a circle of support for all those who felt isolated and alone, like I did, and felt like no one got their grief. I'm now really proud. We now support around 8,000 individuals a month digitally through our circle of support options. Know that there's some women in this room today that we have touched. And I love it when you come up to me and you tell me the difference that we've made, because that keeps me going on those really hard days, because founding a charity is no easy feat. In terms of workplaces, we've actually just launched this report. So if anyone wants to head to pinkelephants.org.au, there is a report, The State of Early Pregnancy Loss and Fertility Challenges in the Workplace. We know there is still so much work to be done. We spend so much of our lifetime at work, yet we are showing up, managing the grief or the death of our baby. We're putting a brave face on and we're hiding in bathroom stalls and we're crying. Or we're leaving work early and we're driving home crying. We're not sharing our grief because we don't feel like we're met by a safe and supportive workplace to be able to deal with it. In September 2021, Pink Elephants lobbied federal government for 3 years, and we managed to amend the Fair Work Act of Australia to include miscarriage as a reason to take bereavement leave. Now, that only means they get 2 days leave, but what it does is it firmly removes the disenfranchised notion of early pregnancy loss, and it says miscarriage, early pregnancy loss is worthy of grieving. It is okay to grieve the loss of your baby. You're entitled to take bereavement leave. That happened because women were telling us that they were standing up in boardrooms presenting while still bleeding after their miscarriage. I had one woman share her experience of being a school teacher. She was going on a trip overseas. She didn't feel like she could let her team down, so she went on this trip knowing that she was going to miscarry any time, and she did miscarry on that work trip. It's not good enough. We need to do so much more, and there is so much more that we can do.
And what you have already done is astronomical, but I know there will be so much more to come from Pink Elephants. Sonita, your work is incredibly important as well. You really emphasise the importance of culturally safe maternity care for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander mums. How can employers ensure that their policies and support systems are really reflective and cognizant of that as well?
That's a really good question. So I think you actually have to go back to the fact that we actually come from the longest living culture. It's an innate way we know how to be. We've been having babies for 60,000 years successfully without Western medicine. So we have experienced loss. We do know how these things happen. So it's about actually respecting our culture. And then developing good health equity plans and strategies. So to do that, you do need authentic leadership. Leadership that's not going to be tokenistic, that's not going to bring us to the table to tick they've brought their little black friend with them to make a policy and what have you. Actually authentic, meaningful engagement, and allowing us to embed what we believe is culturally safe, and have representatives from all cultures that are actually able to make decisions and inform policies and procedures that are going to occur. Because there's nothing worse than being in a room full of non-First Nations people making decisions for us. We are actually content experts in our own culture. And then also, once you put something in place, it actually needs to be re-evaluated. It can't just be the status quo. We did it 10 years ago. We all have different lived experience being First Nations people, and that we all bring a different perspective, and that we do need to really evaluate and constantly re-inform that policy and keep going through it.
Do you feel like enough is being done at the moment to properly address, co-design, collaborate with First Nations people on these kind of policies?
No. I think
is the short answer.
Yeah, no, I think we are there are First Nations people, we are being empowered to be there, but we also still need our allies to support us. But also when we actually get to that point, we need that mentorship to get to that point. And then we just also need people to continue to walk alongside us, but also step aside once we have leaders in that space.
Emma, I want to bring you in now and also want to drop quickly that it is Emma's birthday today and she's here with us doing this, so thank you so much. Emma, as a leader in advocating for parental leave equality, what changes do you think are still needed in workplaces to better support women and families during and after pregnancy, particularly in the face of challenges like fertility issues, miscarriage or stillbirth?
Yeah, well, as you heard, I mean, gosh, so much. It's hard not to be incredibly moved. And I've known Sam since she started the organisation, and I remember sitting down having a coffee with her and her sharing her story around her why, and just feeling so incredibly moved, but also just seeing that passion and determination to make a difference. And Sam, you absolutely deserve complete personal congratulations and public recognition for what you have done. Australian women and families are better off because of you and the work you've done. I mean, to go through that loss, and I'm sure you all felt that hearing that, but to go through that loss is one thing. To put that aside and go, I'm going to make sure it's better for other women, to fight and to go to federal parliament to make those changes. Amazing. Thank you. On behalf of everyone here and the Australian public, thank you. I really mean that. And I think take a bow. There is so much more work to be done. You can hear this, and that is what fires Sonita and Sam and I up and other advocates up in this space every single day. It's why we get up. We just know there is so much more that needs to be done in relation to workplaces and how we think about how work and family is combined. I'm going to just up a level on the answer, because it's not only about pregnancy loss, but it's more around how do we think about work and family and how the two come together in Australia. How do we reconcile that we need better family care provisions in workplaces, and how do we design a system for that? There's probably three key things that feed into that. One is about systems and standards and having them in place. The second is about a business case for action and education in that, because that doesn't happen. Business cases for action can't happen unless people are educated and hear and understand the real stories of what people need. And the third is about culture. So on the standards front, Australia doesn't have government standards around work and family policy. We don't even have an office for work and family anymore. Once upon a time we did have one. It's not a disbanded government agency now. So it means that when we think about how family standards and law is designed, it's often done in isolation around how workplace laws are done. And that's why Sam's work is so remarkable, to be able to cross that divide and have that achieved. We know that Australia is one of the least generous nations when it comes to paid parental leave. We only offer 26, well, we're not there yet, but 26 weeks by 2026 has been what's committed. But the average OECD nation is more than 50 weeks. We were one of the last countries to introduce paid parental leave, and that means there's a patchwork of different paid parental leave policies in organisations. And we see and when I say patchwork, I mean weird and wonderful type of policies that come across our desk. And in that, unfortunately, because there's no obligation for a workplace to contribute to paid parental leave, there's no onus on them to do it, there's no incentive for them to do it, it means that it's down to the employer to really know what a good standard would look like, what it should include, and up to them to do the right thing. And we know that that's not always going to, there'll be plenty of employers that don't do that. So standards are really important. And the work that we do with Sam and others is about getting workplaces to sign up to offering at least some minimum standards around how they support families in the workplace. We united in 2021, mid-COVID, to design national work and family standards with UNICEF Australia and a whole lot of other partners to give workplaces that. What does good look like? What should be included in a great paid parental leave policy more broadly? And we happen to know, and this is going to come down to culture for a minute, that paid parental leave is one of the most contentious policies that exists in organisation. The amount of rules and inclusions and debates that I've seen go on around what it should include. I look at an annual leave policy in an organisation, it's probably 1 or 2 pages. And the parental leave one is 20 pages long. I kid you not. We've had 20-page paid parental leave policies across our desks, all designed almost to mean we don't really want you to use this. So we know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done around getting employers to sign up to standards. The education bit and the business case for action is that there's a win-win in this. Not only is it a great thing to do for employees, there's a win-win in it for the employer. If you want great people to work for you and care about your business, you've got to care about them. And that's about how they are thriving at work and at home. And all the things, we often hear organisations say, bring your best self to work. And then I think, I don't think you really mean that when I see your policies. So, if there is a win-win, we need to educate employers of what that looks like. There is an ROI, and our research tells us that. And the third thing I mentioned was culture. So we lucky enough to be able to conduct a National Work and Families report, and we've done it twice now. Because it's self-funded and it's a labour of love, we've only been able to do it twice over 5 years, but it's been an interesting period to do it because we did it in 2019 and we've just done it again in 2024, so we've had COVID in between. And the sad bit about it is that we're not seeing a whole lot of shifts in terms of how people are feeling when it comes to workplaces understanding their family care needs. And why is that a problem? Well, we've had COVID. I mean, if you couldn't see how difficult it was to manage work and care, when is it going to be that a workplace really understands the challenges every day people go to try and show up to work and do a good job for them? So we saw that 1 in 2 people feel questioned when they use family leave provisions about their commitment to their job. 1 in 2 worried about how it is that they're going to, show up and be considered for career prospects and, all the other things that the ripple effect that people feel about that. And unfortunately, women's stress levels around how they're balancing work and care is up 23% compared to 2019. So we know that there's this sort of after effect of COVID that is still impacting, and workplaces just somehow haven't got the memo. And we have so much pressure around people now, being asked back into the workplace, trying to juggle fertility issues, loss issues, parental leave, care, all of the things. And it's not just about women with young children. All of us, belong to families. We have caring needs. They're going to go up and down over our lifetime as we age. We all have a vested interest in how work and care is balanced. And we need to do much better. So, sorry, rather long answer, but yeah,
no.
Trying to encompass that this is a broad issue.
It is, yeah. And
policy.
I think bringing up those 3 core points is absolutely right. I think, the way that our system supports families at the moment is grossly inadequate across public policy, but within organisations as well. And it does feel like we're in this kind of weird precipice transition period post-COVID where we just don't really know what we're doing and how things are going to kind of make sense and how it's going to evolve in a really positive way. I do want to ask each of you, going back to the topic of particularly around pregnancy and miscarriage within the workplace, how employers can foster a better culture where these conversations are handled with care and empathy. Because, Sam, you mentioned the stigma and the shame that exists, but I also think that there is such a level of discomfort that exists within society broadly, but definitely within organisations as well in how they handle this, which probably perpetuates the stigma and the shame. But, what do we need to be doing better?
We need to get better at having difficult conversations and not being afraid of emotions. Emotions are perfectly healthy, and they can be within grief. There could be moment to moment where it could be sadness, then anger, then it could be jealousy of someone else in the workplace who's just announced a pregnancy, or there's been a donation bucket round for a baby shower. We need to get better at acknowledging all emotions as okay and normal responses to such as grief or even fertility challenges. The loss of an embryo transfer can be massive as well, and that deserves to be met with validation, empathy and understanding. So you've got the societal conversation that needs to shift. So we need to move from at least it happened early, or at least you know you can get pregnant, to I'm sorry your baby died. I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm here for you. Here's where you go to for support. So validation, empathy, and connection are the three main points. When we start to shift the narrative in society, we'll start to shift it in workplaces at the same time too. Workplaces need to have clear policies in place for bereavement leave, for fertility leave, to ensure that those people feel safe to take leave and to understand that this is a workplace that is supportive of this issue. It starts with policy, it doesn't finish there. You need awareness and education. You need to foster more understanding from your people leaders, from your HR teams, to understand these issues and challenges that people face. We did a collaborative study with the University of Sydney. 67% of women reported no support from HR when they returned to work after a pregnancy loss. Can you imagine going back to work and telling people you were pregnant but you're not pregnant? Can you imagine going back to work when you're still bleeding from the loss of that baby because all you were entitled to was 2 days leave? It is one of the most challenging things our community tell us time in, time out. It's the part that hits the hardest that they didn't expect. It's going into boardrooms, it's going into managers and having conversations around this. It isn't easy for them. But with things like domestic violence, we don't expect the person who's the victim to fix it, right? We don't expect them to know what they need. But almost with pregnancy loss, we're still at that position. We still expect us, those that have got lived experience, to advocate for our needs. It shouldn't be that way. Workplaces should be equipped with the tools, the resources, the awareness, the education, and clear policies on how to support the people through this. Because if 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss and 1 in 6 couples are struggling to conceive, there are a huge volume of women and partners who are going through this in your workplace right now.
Sonita, I'm interested in your perspective on that as well.
So I think open communication is the best way to have that individualised, woman-centred type of approach to how someone would want to be treated within the workplace. From a cultural perspective, regardless of the outcome of a pregnancy, childbirth is still our baby's first ceremony. And you do have to recognise that in that bereavement process, we also we have sorry business associated. So it's not as clear cut as you get 2 days off. I know that in our family dynamics, you know, my mum would grieve the loss of that, and being an employee, 2 days off work probably wouldn't be sufficient enough for her. So I think it's really important that acknowledging that it is still a birth as well. It is still a child, it's someone's child, but culturally it has significance for us. We're still a mother. So I think allowing women to make a decision about how they want to be treated and not making it a more difficult process, being stuck in a 2-day leave process or things like that.
Which is, I mean, a very inadequate approach already, but it's also a very Western paradigm as well, as you noted.
Yeah. Definitely.
Emma, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, often this question's always a really interesting one for me. It's personal, in that it's a family story. My cousin was pregnant with twins, and she very sadly lost them at 23 weeks. And that was particularly difficult. We have, it's losing one child times 2. I remember feeling, that sense of just why is it that I got lucky and had healthy twins, and so anyway, there's a lot wrapped up in that. But back to the work story connected with it, her workplace offered paid parental leave, but because they didn't have a pregnancy loss component for, what happened if baby, the baby loss, stillbirth or early pregnancy loss happened, they weren't going to apply the paid parental leave. And she asked for my advice and how we should tackle it with the organisation. And of course I went in and I advocated for her. And the only reason that got approved in the end is because her twins lived for 2 hours and 5 hours when they were born. And so no one could argue that they weren't alive And that just should never happen. And so, you know, that's the kind of story that I'm sure you have your own stories, but that keeps me motivated every day to go and talk to organisations to think about, you know, their policies and the real life impact that these have on people and their families. So Sam's right, 2 days is completely inadequate, and I'm pleased to say that there are organisations that are taking up the gauntlet and saying, yes, we need to talk about this. This is not good enough, and it's often only because there's one or two individuals in that company that feel deeply and strongly about this. And that's not good enough either. It shouldn't be back to one individual in an organisation who's, you know, really championing and fighting for this in their organisation. So that's why the work that Sam's doing around working with government and changing some of this legislation and pushing the envelope is so important. But when it comes to workplaces doing the right thing, there are great examples, and we do like to call them out, and Sam and I really make sure we do that each time. We're loudly shouting out because we want to catch out organisations doing good things to inspire other organisations to do the same. So now we see organisations coming out with at least a decent 10 days leave, which is still inadequate, I'm sure, as many of you would agree. But at least it's something, and they're starting to think about better inclusions around their paid parental leave policy. Now, remember, I've talked about, again, it's not obligatory at all for an employer to even have a paid parental leave policy, let alone them have a policy in there for if a baby doesn't make it. So we know that there's so much more work that needs to be done on advocating for, you know, not only parental leave but reproductive health in organisations. The other examples of what organisations are doing is really making sure that wraparound support is there. Sam's right, it's not just about having a policy and a document just in case it might happen to an employee in EU, but actually to have a wraparound support for partners. So the better organisations are not just doing it for the individual who physically lost that child, but also for the partner of that family. And I think that is incredibly important in our fight for gender equality. Mm. I'm a big advocate for men taking paid parental leave because unless we see this as a whole family affair, then we're never going to break down these gender stereotypes that pregnancy loss or parental leave or raising children is a woman's issue when it is not. So it's really important that we see gender neutral policies, the dropping of labels that often exist around this, and just note that, you know, family care and wellbeing policies are vital for your organisation on so many different levels. Yeah.
Sonita, what do you believe are some key elements of culturally safe care that could be adapted or incorporated into workplace policies to better support Indigenous Australians?
So Arnie said so much before, and maybe people didn't really pick up on stuff, but she probably could be up here too. So to support policies, so pregnancy, you know, miscarriage, motherhood, all that, that's all really women business. It is very normal for us as First Nations people. We're also very family centric, so it's not as linear as you know, a mum or a dad or anything like that. And we tend to get really lost in this Western society or system, and they generally take away from our cultural norms because it doesn't align with everyone else's cultural norms, which is really frustrating because as First Nations people, it's just the way we are. So it's really hard to articulate those things when it's just our innate ways of being, knowing and doing. You know, it's acknowledging that we have significant kinship arrangements. You know, I work as a midwife, obviously I'm a clinician. That red flag of you don't have your child, let's put in a child safety report, so significant in our world that, it, you know, for me, I kind of look back and I go, I have to stop other clinicians and be like, have you explored, you know, I've had a cousin live with me not really realising he wasn't actually a sibling. My whole entire life growing up. And then I kind of realised, but it's just that, you know, a lot of things don't align with the way the Western society has to do it. So I think it's just enabling allowing us to have those cultural understandings and communication, and really championing and standing alongside us to advocate for what we actually need within the workplace. And I've got two brains in me, but I think only the little one works. So if I've waffled, pull me back.
You've absolutely not waffled.
The little one.
The little brain is working very well. Emma, I'm interested actually, just on Sonita's point, if you've seen anything that organisations have done to be proactive in that area.
Yeah, I mean, we call for and are educating organisations on the importance of kinship care and asking for that. And we'll often ask as part of our National Work and Family Standards, because we're certifying workplaces on, meeting these minimum standards. Do they have a caring framework, not just a parental leave policy, but a carers framework in place? And do they understand kinship care? Do you have a kinship care policy or broadly? And most organisations say, no, I don't know what you're talking about. What is that? And so that begins another dialogue on another level around, the importance of understanding different cultural needs. And, we talk about, it's interesting because in the Western world we do talk a lot about it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah, but
and yet we don't act like it. So, there a lot more needs to be done to understand the importance. And that is about dialogue and inviting in employees of different diverse backgrounds to help you design your policies. I mean, if you're in a position to influence your organisation's policies when it comes to parental leave or caring more broadly, my guidance would be find fellow people in your organisation, diverse people that really care about this issue with you, and co-design it. This village mentality is so important that we need the village to come up with, what good looks like. It's no good having one or two individuals that are tasked with it in an organisation, an HR person who goes, I don't know what it should all have in it, and off they go, sort of applying it like, approaching it like any other sort of legal document. This is about people, really, and it's about caring, and it's about bothering to actually bring a circle of people in that need to help design. You don't need all the answers as one individual, and nor should you have it. This is absolutely about bringing a family of people together to design what looks good for your organisation, is going to represent your people's needs.
Sam, in your experience, what impact does the presence or absence of workplace support have on a woman's ability to cope with loss?
It has a huge impact. We know from women that work in supportive workplaces, they tell us that they feel equipped to return to work. I'll give an example here, which I have permission to share. So one of our partners is QBE. QBE have worked with us for a number of years. They also work with parents at work. And they offer really progressive policy, 12 weeks leave for any pregnancy loss. And that 12 weeks leave can be broken up at any point, because it also recognises, that pregnancy loss is not a moment in time that impacts you. There's then trying to conceive again. Do you know how brave you have to be to roll the dice and be willing to fall pregnant again, but yet being absolutely terrified that I might lose this baby too? It's incredibly anxiety inducing. So it recognises they might need some support during that time, some leave at that time. It also covers things like pregnancy after loss. Again, incredibly anxiety inducing. I'm terrified I'm going to lose this baby too, because it's happened to me before. And so other people have this immense joy and feel like you're all fixed because you're pregnant after loss. That often is not the case. So, for example, QB have this incredible policy. But one of the things that they do well is they also hold quarterly circles to raise awareness. And we have really meaningful discussions with different people within that organisation who are those champions of change. And we had this beautiful lady who is now a Pink Elephant's peer support companion, but she returned to work the day after her bereavement leave for her miscarriage to one of those awareness events, to one of those panels. And it was a digital event, but then she bravely messaged me on LinkedIn, and the thanks from her was that she felt like they got it. They understood. She felt like she could ask for that flexibility that she needed in those coming weeks while she was navigating something incredibly challenging to her. And that was her third pregnancy loss. She deserved all of that and more. So it makes a huge difference. But what's really important to hear today is if you don't do this, there are very clear links to poor mental health outcomes with pregnancy loss and fertility challenges. So that means PTSD, it means anxiety, it's depression. Really, really heartbreakingly is we've seen a huge increase in suicidal tendency posts in our online communities this year. We've grown, and so that volume of those posts has also grown, but it's heartbreaking to hear how affected these women are and how little support they've received, and that has led them to where they are now. There is a really clear correlation from a lack of support leading to poor mental health outcomes. Workplaces, it's not about productivity. Yes, it is if you want to go into numbers, presenteeism, attrition, you can do all of that. But if you want to lead with heart and values that make a true difference for people, then you need to lead with empathy and understand that when you don't provide this support, you're putting your people at risk of poor mental health outcomes. And if we want to link it to psychosocial hazards and Safe Work Australia, we can go that far, right? But really, this is a people problem that deserves a people response, a human response where we support each other.
Yeah. It would also probably link to productivity, I would dare say, as well. You know, that, I mean, just in sheer terms of that, and we always need to look at things through that lens.
Yeah, can I just say that? Because I totally agree. This is about, if you do, like as I said, if you want people to care about your business, you've got to care about them. Right? This is, I mean, that's just a reality. But there is genuinely a return on investment of this, right? This is not a cost to an organisation. There absolutely is. We have proved that through research that there are positive outcomes and uplift around engagement, job satisfaction, lower work-life conflict from employers that have become certified as family-friendly workplaces because they've put these kind of provisions in, and it's we're starting to see the positive impact for their employees in doing it compared to those that don't have this. So absolutely, it's an investment worth making.
I am conscious of time, but Sonita, I do have a question for you. I want to know how you view the role of midwives and healthcare professionals in collaborating with employers, because we don't see a whole lot of that, I don't think, to ensure that women are receiving the comprehensive support that bridges both their healthcare needs and workplace wellbeing.
Yeah, I think we definitely don't have a conduit between, you know, from being a midwife or a healthcare professional and going back into the workplace. I think it just comes back to, as genuine people, we need to be kind. We need to remember that we all have very different experiences. Birth trauma, I forget, was it Jed? Jed was talking about how New South Wales has done a birth trauma release and things like that. We don't all have positive or, you know, or negative experiences, that being a parent or coming back to work after a miscarriage. I mean, I'm a clinician who's potentially was experiencing one, and navigating that system is absolutely, as someone who works in it, absolutely horrible. I think, yeah, it's about having that flexibility, having that communication, putting people's wellbeing. It's never as straightforward as you want it to be, and as someone who works in a very midwifery space, I mean, I can tell you now that we have talks with people that have just recently had babies, and, you know, I'm like, oh, you've actually got birth trauma. Like, you actually really need to debrief and have wellbeing. It's quite triggering to be in an environment that can be so, you know, so focused on that as well. But also, what you said before, perinatal suicide is our highest mortality in women that are having babies, and I would assume, obviously, in the pregnancy loss space as well. So I think it all comes back to the individual. I think it's being culturally safe, and I think it's allowing the person who's returning back to work or to dictate what they need and what their wellbeing would be.
Sam, one last question for you, but how would you advise anyone in the audience today, anyone listening, around having the right kind of conversation, the way that you navigate this conversation with peers that might be experiencing that?
Come to pinkelephants.org.au. We've got a heap of resources that you can read. Things like use your words. Your language matters. Be careful what you say to us that have gone through early pregnancy loss, because there is no at least it happened early, or at least you know you can get pregnant. To us, it's the death of our baby. It's the death of a future we imagined with a baby in our arms in the next 6 to 9 months. And for many of us, it's profound and life-changing. So you need to learn how to use your language and start with statements that are validating, that have empathy, and then connect people to support. I'm sorry for your loss is actually enough. You'll be surprised how little people actually say that to you. Don't be scared of our reactions. Like I said earlier, all emotions are healthy, valid, and need to be displayed. It's okay to be uncomfortable, but imagine how uncomfortable we are trying to manage your reaction to our grief. It shouldn't be put on us to make you feel okay when it's my baby that died. So be really careful about your language. Make sure that it has that validation, empathy, and connection. Do your research. It takes you less than a couple of minutes to go to a website like Pink Elephants and learn what to say and how to be supportive. Can I just add one thing?
Please.
I just want to add a couple of acknowledgements. Firstly, an acknowledgement to country. It always was and always will be. An acknowledgement to a friend and supporter, Emma. You've heard her champion myself. Emma really did listen to me when I started Pink Elephants and offered advice with no strings attached, and has supported me for many years. And we've heard here that supportive friends make a difference. You've got this opportunity here to meet new friends. There's many of you in the audience that I also know that have supported me in different ways. I'm always grateful. And I want to finish with an acknowledgement of all the babies' lives that were lost and not seen, because they deserve to be seen and your experience deserves to be validated.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you so much, all three of you, for joining this session today and sharing, such valuable insights and lived experience, which we know is such an important conduit to this whole day that we're talking about. And I am just really grateful for having you all involved. And Emma, again, thank you for coming here on your birthday. Please join me in thanking Emma Walsh, Sonita Guidice and Sam Payne.